I just want to start this by saying this isn't a hate video. I went in with the best of intentions here, and I found more good here than I thought, and I'm not just saying that. In fact, there were some genuine highs for me, but there's definitely also some crust around the edges, and I still have a lot of issues. It's important to note I played Overwatch 1 and 2 for a collective 40 or so hours for this review. I also played a couple hundred hours, I think, back around when it came out. This video is from the perspective of a casual player, and I ended up solo queuing for all of my Overwatch 1 footage. And predictably I did very poorly, so my ability to diagnose these issues may vary, but I've tried to understand the game as best I could. You could also argue that I just suck, and fair enough there, man. But I still think the game has flaws at its core. Maybe. So now that you've been given the disclaimer, playing Overwatch is like being in a room filled with 80% chlorine gas. And you can put that quote on the box. Maybe you'll hit a pocket of air and have a great time, but you don't know when you'll hit one because gas is invisible. You can only start breathing in pockets of gas at random and hope your lungs don't burn. The game is capricious, and winning can often feel out of your control, especially when playing solo. So I'll be going over the game mechanics first, and covering the new stuff after that. First of all, you're way too dependent on your team. The game becomes much more enjoyable when you're in a team with people you know, cause like dominoes, once one of you dies, so do the rest of you. Godspeed if you're a solo queuer. Entire pushes can be placed into the recycle bin if your only tank just fucking dies right out of the gate, leaving your main damage sponge gone, and the enemy team free to redirect all that damage straight into the DPSs and healers. So you either live as a team, or you die as a team. Overwatch 2 does its best to alleviate this through its new ping system, but this is a band-aid and nothing will ever replace being in a call with people you know. I think most people simply don't want to talk to anyone, they just want to hop in and play and get some kills, and there's really nothing wrong with that. But all it takes is one idiot, or one leaver, or a non-team player, and your chances of victory are crippled. Keep in mind when you're going solo, that's 4 people of indeterminate skill that you have to rely on. It's like drawing 4 cards to determine what kind of teammates you're gonna get. You can't just get high values either. They have to make a hand, and you better hope your team forms a stronger hand than theirs does. It really sucks to say, but a quality team is kind of required to have fun. Accept this now, or turn back. This is why there are people who yell at their teammates, by the way.
We're getting slapped because we don't have a fucking shield tank and then you want to keep playing fucking Dragonflame.
No, you're just bad.
People are more than willing to be friendly when they're winning. But even if you personally are doing great, you might find yourself getting dragged down by dumbass teammates who only play the classes they want to, or who are stuck in DPS but aren't very good, or who don't group up, or who spend their time as tank hiding in the back because they're afraid to take damage.
Right now our DPS are literally leading the charge. We need your tank to do something.
Orisa, I swear to fuck, you gotta do something.
And then you really can pull the team card. There really are times where it's not your fault. Even if you ask to group up or whatever, you can always just get ignored. So is it really any wonder why people see that they're team? And of course, even with a team of people you know, you can still lose horribly. You're always rolling the dice. Speaking of rolling, it's also really easy to roll or get rolled yourself. I can only speak from how things feel when I'm playing, and the game feels really unpredictable. Like a tide, things can shift and you can find yourself caught in a steamroll that's really hard to get your momentum back from. The perfect example is this clip here where we go from spawn camping to being spawn camped. This is the same round, by the way. Your game experience is extremely volatile, and you can end up switching between personally doing great and horribly within moments of playing the same character, which really doesn't help when you're trying to improve and learn what you're doing wrong. I think most people will tend to want to ignore their team and go off and just shoot enemies. Doing this will get you and then your team killed though. Except sometimes when it doesn't, if say their team is even less organized than yours. Overwatch also intends for you to switch your heroes when it's not working. Class picks are built into the DNA of this game and that would be fine, but the game design inherently fights itself here. Just look at something like ult percentage. How many times have you said to yourself something along the lines of, well, Junkrat's not really working right now, but I'm at 90%, so I'll continue continue playing Junkrat anyway. So even though you know it's a bad idea, you're gonna be charging into a losing battle, knowing full well it's a losing battle regardless. On the other hand, if you throw that ult away, you're potentially throwing away a powerful tide-changing tool. Now, Overwatch 2 has you retain up to 30% ultimate charge, and I think this is a good change. I think there are quite a few good changes, actually. More on this later. But I'm also not sure if 30% is enough. And of course, what if someone simply wants to play their favorite hero? I've seen plenty of players who just like Genji, and that's it, and they aren't changing. They can either pick something they don't like and be bored, or risk being that guy who ruins it for everyone else. And the Overwatch team has said that they are trying to move away from hard counters, but why were they in the game in the first place? What's wrong with just picking the playstyle you like and then filling your role, you know, doing your job? Of course, there will always be soft counters to a certain extent. For example, long-range DPS will always have that advantage over close-range only DPS, but the team could easily try to balance away from hard countering, which leads us into hero picks. Sometimes you can't know that you picked right until you see the enemy. Of course, individual skill plays a big factor, pretty large one actually, but it does kind of make picking the right hero a dice roll. There aren't that many generalist classes, and I've found myself staring at the hero select screen many times, looking at all the options and not really thinking any of them were worth picking. All this variety, and yet, every time I go to play comp, I always see a Soldier 76 there. For example, let's say your favorite hero is Junkrat. Maybe you even got into Overwatch in the first place because you just wanted to shoot bombs at people. So long as you pick a hero that can be supported by your team, as in not picking a flight character in conjunction with a shield hero, it should be fine, right? Well, actually no, because now you're getting hard countered by that Pharah, or a sniper, or really any long-range hit-scan opponent. Most characters have their share of counters, and many times there's little to no counterplay. It's extremely difficult to beat the odds or pull out a backup plan outside of just running away or hoping your team handles them. There are entire websites dedicated to documenting this, and I think all of these hard counters are just not a very good idea. One time I was playing Torbjorn on defense for no other reason than I thought it'd be fun, and then the round started and I found out they had a Junkrat, and I couldn't have known this until just then because the classes stay veiled until the round starts. What should I have done here? If I suicide to change classes, I'm one player down on our team, and I'm only weakening our chances. If the enemy kills me, I'm just feeding them ult percentage. If I continue fighting, I'm at a severe disadvantage due to class counters, which will just end up in my death anyway. Or even worse, if I prolong my death by healing or slowly trying to make my way back and die on the way, which happens pretty often, then I guarantee that I will just respawn late and hold my team back a few seconds, which can make a huge difference in some game modes, such as the newest one. There are no good options here except to either hope my team makes up for my weakness or just not bringing Torbjorn in the first place. And I've heard that if you didn't play meta picks in the later years of Overwatch 1's competitive, you would catch shit for this very reason. It's like picking which 5 chess pieces to bring, but you can't know what the enemy has until the round starts. I just have to wait to die or hope my teammates are prepared to pick up the slack. And even if all of this is intentional, which I actually think it is, it's still kind of dumb because it means that some of their characters are just a dice roll as to whether or not they're even going to be any good for the round. This other time when I was playing Junkrat, I noticed I had a Pharah, so I just had to walk back into spawn and change my hero. I think that was the right call. I was pretty close anyway, but that's still some wasted time, which is only ever a bad thing. And now I can't have fun with the class that I wanted to play in the first place just because they have someone who counters me now. Then there are, for a lack of a better term, abilities that are just plain bullshit. Stuns, slowdowns, insta-kills, and other bullshit that boil down to just hitting like E on your keyboard or whatever. For the longest time, McCree could stun and kill 200 health classes instantly and with minimal effort. You hit E, keep the cursor over their body, and fan the hammer. That's it. Sure, they patched this out and now he's got like a homing grenade, but it was still in the game since the beginning, and it only got changed like a week ago. For what it's worth, they did try to reduce a few of the insta-kills, only keeping the ones that are harder to pull off. Of course, you can still take huge amounts of damage from lucky headshots, and you can even sometimes be insta-killed from halfway across the map by headshots your enemy didn't even intend to get. Keep in mind, all of this is doubly bad in a game where one death becomes the rest of your team's deaths. Remember the the dominoes analogy, everyone needs to be alive, so having a small chance for sudden death is always going to be a risk. Imagine if they put some of these abilities without change into any other multiplayer shooter. The only way to balance it out would be with equally bullshit abilities, and since the stakes are raised by including one insta-kill move, they have to meet those stakes with other frustrating tactics just to make sure no one hero is too strong. And if these tier lists I keep seeing are any indication, they didn't even really do that. There are also tons of abilities that just aren't fun to deal with, like many ultimates can just be stopped with any stun. Baptiste can just deny fatal kills whenever he feels like it. Mei can heal off all the damage you just did and stay immortal until she's done. Sombra can teleport away whenever she feels like it. Tracer, who is already a huge pain in the ass to try and hit by the way, can reverse time for herself and heal back to where she was 3 seconds ago. Mercy can revive anyone and undo your work, which may be especially punishing if it's a tank. None of these are ultimates, by the way, just cooldowns, and everything I just listed here is as simple as pressing a button on your keyboard. On top of that, tanks can get pretty close to or even surpass a DPS in terms of damage output, by the way. And now with Overwatch 2, this happens kind of more than you'd think, which is even worse in open queues without class limits. Now, it's not like asymmetrical gameplay is a sin or anything, but I really think the way Overwatch implements it was just never a good idea to begin with. It's too much. There are just so many abilities that in some situations it really feels like sinking damage into the enemy and just rotating out all your active abilities for a quarter of the match time until one of you dies and that weakness snowballs into a team wipe. Most of the time Overwatch is a clusterfuck, and for all your fancy abilities it just devolves into a spam fest. But hey, what do I know? I'm not a game designer. To be fair, if you play carefully, as in, you know, there's a Junkrat in that tight hallway, so don't go in there, or, you know, there's a Roadhog, so just stay the hell out of his radius, then you're gonna do better for sure. But many abilities can be countered or just nullified for too little effort or skill on the player's part, and the risk of dying instantly is never zero. Even then, it's very possible you could have just never known in time. Like, look at this! She couldn't have known that I was around that corner, and yet she only had a split second to react. It's like Bugs Bunny and Yosemite Sam pulling out increasingly large guns at each other. Some abilities just shut others down, more or less disconnected from player skill or effort. Oh, I canceled out of it too early. So basically, this is Overwatch's cycle. You push in, and you hope you have better hero counters. You try to deal out more kills than the enemy. If you start losing too many, it's time to suicide, preferably without feeding the enemies, or try to back out and die anyway. Rinse and repeat until somebody wins. That's the entire game. Now, in spite of how negative I just was, I don't utterly despise this game at all. There are genuine moments of fun to be found, and hey, if you like this game loop, well then there you go, man. Don't listen to me. But the game oftentimes feels very chaotic and it can all go sour on a hair trigger. And in many ways, I feel like I enjoy Overwatch in spite of itself. It's like eating a piece of bacon and biting out all the bits of meat and just leaving the fat on the table. Anyway, let's talk about the new stuff. First, the bad. I paid $40 for the season pass, but to be fair, that's probably just because I'm a dumbass. I didn't do it for any of the epic skins, right? But for review purposes. I thought I needed it to try out the new characters, and that's not really the case. Hey, sometimes you gotta buy that fast food sandwich to make sure they're not putting roadkill in the meat, right? This shit's kinda confusing, so I'll explain real quick. There are 2 passes, free and premium. Both let you unlock Kiriko, but premium is immediately, whereas free takes a while. Premium also only lasts for 9 weeks before you can't earn anything from that pass anymore and you gotta get the next one. The premium pass on its own is 1,000 Overwatch coins or $10. But the one I got, the Watchpoint pack, is $40 and it comes with the premium pass and a bunch of stupid shit I don't care about. So, whoops. But premium also allows access to all heroes right out of the gate. If you didn't own Overwatch 1, then to help ease you into the game, they lock about half the roster away and slowly unlock characters over the course of about 100 matches played. Every hero is going to be free to play. Boy, I sure do hope that the new character doesn't become a comp meta and I can't play her until she's unlocked. It is nice that the game is free now though, but it does make me a little concerned for the future of Overwatch's monetization. It's not as if Blizzard is exactly exactly cautious with how they monetize their other titles. Then there's Blizzard's solution to disruptive behavior. I read a whole article about this new thing they're doing called Defense Matrix. There's a summary of the changes on screen. Some of them are neutral or even a good thing, but then there's stuff like SMS Protect, which is just dumb. Why should I have to put in my phone number to play this game? No other game asks you to do this, and it's not as if other games are free from assholes. Yet, all those games have their own solutions that presumably work fine. What was wrong with just muting people if you didn't like them? And I mean, isn't two-factor authentication something you're supposed to do? Should I regret that now? Should I regret that I put my phone number in there and now they're using it against me? And hey, what if I get banned? Are they refunding my money? I don't know. I think this is a step too far. And it's not that hard to change your number. You absolutely can. It's just a pain in the ass. They're also monitoring and recording your voice chat, and I really hope you trust Blizzard not to keep any of that or record when you're not hitting the button. This is at best weird, and at worst a privacy concern. So basically, they're taking more steps towards 1984 just to curtail people calling you doo-doo in comp. Cool. All these changes are dumb and stupid. So now let's talk about the new characters instead. I enjoy their gameplay, and I think they're fine additions in that regard, but their personalities and character designs feel even less distinctive to me. The character designs have always been a little overbearing, but at least I got a personality read off of a few of them. Kiriko and Sojourn in particular I get basically nothing from. They're like looking at wet paper sacks. It's also kind of getting hard to tell who is who. In an increasing lineup, they just can feel like skinny character number 23. Junker Queen in particular can be hard to identify as a tank if she's far away. She just looks like a normal DPS that they scaled up by 20%. Most tanks are massive, or they have some distinctive quality like Sugma's ridiculously large shoulder pads, and that silhouette read is especially important considering skins can entirely change the color scheme of a character. This is all especially bad because tanks are meant to absorb a crazy amount of damage, so you need to know who is who really quick, and you kind of can't sometimes. I also have mixed feelings about the new voice acting. With Overwatch 2, they redid a bunch of the voiceover, and I think a lot of it is maybe a little excessive. Same with some of the animations. And you can end up hearing the same lines over and over too. They also removed some of the memes. I require your assistance. All these new interactions are nice and all when they're not being cringe, but Kiriko in particular has pretty weak voice acting, IMO.
Let the kitsune guide you. We hunt foxes where I come from.
Where I'm from, the foxes fight back. My mom wants to know if you've kept up with the sword.
I swore never to wield a blade again.
I'll tell you're thinking about picking it back up.
But it's also not really my field, so decide for yourself.
Doomfist, how can you live with yourself? So many people have died because of you.
Yes, but many more have lived.
That makes no sense. Do you hear yourself? Ugh, you're the worst.
Then, concerning role queue, I think it's a good idea to limit the amount of tanks we can have now to 1. But, if I'm playing comp and my tank leaves or sucks eggs, I can't fill that gap. I'm not allowed. And no one is coming to backfill in comp, by the way. So get fucked! Now, role queue used to increase wait times for DPS, but I actually think that bringing the tank down to 1 count alleviated this. But what, do they not trust their players to self-organize? Hey, at least I have both options now, making a bad change into a good one. Then there's a new game mode, Push. I do like it, but the worst thing about it is that there's little point in continuing once the enemy team has a massive lead with like 10 seconds left. Some of the changes feel unnecessary too, like the HUD in particular. It just feels like YouTube changing their layout for the 80th time again. Look! The HUD is different. In some areas, I think it's actually kind of worse. I like that there's an actual scoreboard now, though this certainly encourages the toxicity they were spending so much time and effort to get rid of. But all in all, aside from the stuff I just mentioned, I would generally say the game mechanics are an improvement from what we had in Overwatch 1's final days. To be honest, I think I'd actually play now and again, like in my off time, but all this just is more Overwatch again. The whole reason I or anyone even thought about coming back to begin with is because we heard about the PvE, which was discussed as early as almost exactly 3 years ago. So if that's what you were here for, Sorry. I think Overwatch 2 represents a lot of wasted potential for me. I think what we got now should have been a big content pass for Overwatch 1, and Overwatch 2 could have been pure PvE with its own mechanics. Overwatch 1 should have stayed for those who liked the PvP, so players could have either one, and if the server loads too much, you wouldn't even have to keep the servers up, just give fans a copy of the server stuff so that they can keep it alive. This way, you have the freedom to have the abilities to be as bullshit as you want, because there are no human players to piss off. Oh, a fucking robot got random crit in the head? Who cares? And then I could play with my friends or alone, and there'd be no issues about how much of a good time I might have if you modulate the difficulty based on player size. Overwatch 2 could have taken its own path, and both games could be distinct, you know, to warrant a 2 on the end. The old PvE was boring after a little while, though. It was too simplistic, so I thought a whole game dedicated to just the PvE would be a lot more in-depth and fun. It's already far too late for PvP to pivot its mechanics anyway. I mean, look at all the time they've invested. So much work went into all this shit, so what happens when a mechanic is bad or poorly balanced? That's a lot of work to just throw away, and you can't retcon them out of the lore either. They're in there for good. This is why I thought it would be a good idea to split the two games. Oh well. And now it's time for the most depressing part of the video. I don't think Overwatch has a very bright future ahead. In fact, we're already kind of in the middle of that. Remember the PTR? The new character was basically finalized. The new map had finished art. I thought the point of the PTR was to playtest stuff, but they were basically done, assuming that only minor tweaks would be needed. What if the map sucked? I mean, just look at Horizon Lunar Colony, or Paris, which were apparently so bad they got permanently taken out of rotation. What if the new hero playstyle was fundamentally flawed? Even in an explicit testing zone, they couldn't drop the polish for 1 second to make sure the mechanics would still work with the much wider player base. For all I know, maybe internal testing really is sufficient for this, but does it not have a greater risk of them adding a shitty character? And I mean, just look at how well people received Brigitte upon her debut. The real point I want to make, though, is that I think Blizzard will never give up their game to the fans. To show you what I mean, I went and played some workshop for Overwatch 1. I just wanted to, you know, see what there was. I played a boss rush mode. There was a red light, green light type game, which was actually a lot of fun, even if the Seekers had bullshit advantage the whole time. And even a point and click adventure, which I got bored with after like 2 minutes. But it was still surprisingly restrictive. It seems like a refusal on Blizzard's part to allow modding or really any player contributions of any kind. They don't let you import custom maps, characters, animations, textures, sound, music, or even sprays or custom profile pictures. It's as if they have this fucking death grip on their game. Back in the final days of Overwatch 1, I found a Doomfist parkour server on the workshop. I thought, there's only like 3 moves, how in depth could this possibly be? Well, boy was I fucking wrong. And the shit you're seeing on screen right now, that's just hard difficulty. There were like 12 other difficulties ahead of this, and players were free to make their own courses. This community was apparently large enough to warrant its own Discord server, but now it's gone. Doomfist has different mechanics now. Those players invested who knows what kind of time. I mean, more than I ever put in, and now it's gone. How long is it before the parts of Overwatch you liked are gone too? While I was waiting to get into Overwatch 2 for the first time, I couldn't help but think it was kind of dumb. But hey, server issues on day one are expected, right? I mean, the word DDoS was thrown around, so how can I possibly complain? My boy, I can. Think about it. I have to connect to a server before I can even play single player? I can't even fuck around offline in the practice range and learn the new heroes? I mean, that's something I spent 30 minutes doing anyway, but it's worse than just wasting my time. Imagine this for a second. Let's say there's an album you love, right? And you pay for a file of said album. The only way to listen to that file is to use a decoder, which is only accessible online. But one day, that online decoder dies and they don't provide a copy of it. You now have a very expensive junk text file that you can't read or use. Even though you paid very good money to own that instance, this is games as a service. It's a bit simplified, but that's what it is. One day, Overwatch is going offline for good. Maybe not soon, maybe not for a long time, but someday it will. What happens to your copy of Overwatch 1 and all those in-game items you paid for? They're yours. Imagine if you bought like a bass guitar or something, and then someone comes into your room, takes your bass away, and hands you a flute instead, and says, "Basses are just gone forever now. Rip all your time investment. Isn't that bullshit? And it's what Blizzard is doing to Overwatch right now. It's what they've been doing this whole time. Now, they don't have to save every possible version of their game Minecraft style, but they could at least give the fans something instead of just letting the game disappear forever when they're done with it. People used to really like this game. There was all this community passion and all these memes, and now the general impression that I get is that no one really cares anymore, and you can't even go back to when it was good. Having said all that, there are still pockets of fun in Overwatch. I don't think the game is beyond redemption or anything. And while there's definitely a lot of bullshit here, I'm not really sure I can go as far as I hate it and I'd never play it again. If you can get past the ways in which Blizzard is fucking their own game and the inherent volatility and dumb bullshit of the matches, then Overwatch 2 can actually be pretty fun. But it's kind of a lot to get over, and there's no shame in not wanting to roll the dice to see if you're gonna have a good time. When you're winning, or at least when the match is pretty neck and neck, the game can be pretty rewarding, so long as you're not dying over and over. But when you're losing, or especially when you're on a loss streak, you can just start to question why you even fucking bothered in the first place. I can honestly still see myself hopping in now and again, but it also feels like somewhat of a waste to try to get better at the game. And while I do think what we got here is better than Overwatch 1, it's also still pretty disappointing to have no PvE. But, you know what? Maybe I'll talk about it when they actually release it. Cheers.
What's your shield at? My will.
Is that a woman?
Unfortunately, she likes Overwatch. I don't think it would ever work between us.